Hello and welcome to the Next Goal Wins podcast. Today's episode is episode number 9 and we are joined by a man who has managed clubs such as Portsmouth, Blackpool, Blackburn, Oxford United and is currently the Lincoln City manager. We are delighted to be joined by Michael Appleton. We hope you enjoy and thanks again for listening to the podcast.
Welcome to another episode of Next Goal Wins podcast. How are you two?
Yeah, I'm very good. Excited about today's guest. He has played over 160 professional games and has managed clubs such as Portsmouth, Blackburn, Blackpool, Oxford United, and is currently the Lincoln City manager. Just want to introduce Michael Appleton. How are we, Michael?
I'm very well, fellas. Yeah, very well. Looking forward to actually getting back on the grass again over the next couple of weeks. Looking forward to a new season.
Yeah, I can imagine. So if we go right back to the start where it all began, you grew up in Salford. What was it like to get the chance to join Manchester United, as in growing up in Salford?
Yeah, I mean, it was a great opportunity from someone like myself who, you know, anyone who knows Salford as a place, it's very much a red city. Obviously, Manchester's a big place. Greater Manchester's an even bigger place. But as a Salford lad, there's no doubt about it that you know, Man United was the team that everyone supported, and you know, I was lucky enough to get the opportunity to go there as an apprentice and sign professional forms, and you know, eventually actually you know, play for them on a couple of occasions.
Yeah, so you were like a few of our guests before. You were coached by my granddad Eric Harrison. What was he like as a coach, and how much of an influence did he have on your playing days, and obviously maybe moving into your coaching days?
Yeah, he had a massive influence, you know, and there's no doubt about it. Obviously, you know, Eric for a number of years, the amount of players that he produced at the football club, I'll be very surprised if it ever gets surpassed at any clubs up and down the country. And I think that certainly from a playing point of view, he had that. I'll try the best way to describe it, but he had a knack of you wanting to do really well for him. That's the best way I can describe it. I can't actually describe it any other way. That you know, same as Sir Alex, really, where you had that much respect for them. You always wanted to perform and play well and do well, and you know, that's the sort of biggest you know, that's the biggest compliment I can give him. But I think even from a coaching point of view, I remember I remember something he said one day, and I've used it, and I've done a couple of interviews with papers, national papers, etc. over the years, and I always remember this because he always said to me at one point, he said, "Listen, you're going to have a good career as a player." Obviously, he didn't know what was going to happen in terms of the injury, but he said, "You'll have a good career as a player." He said, "But I think you'll have an even better career as a coach because you listen." He said, "When I speak, you give me eye contact. You know, I know you're taking the information in." And he said, "I genuinely think you will go into the coaching side of it." So that stuck with me massively. Certainly through my time when I was getting injured, and I'm thinking to myself, you know, what do I do next?
Yeah. So did you sort of take bits out of what he did in his training sessions, or have you taken them into stuff that you do nowadays?
Yeah, definitely. And interestingly, I had a conversation with Paul McGuinness probably about a month or so ago. Obviously, you'll know from his time at United, the amount of time that he spent there as a coach and education welfare officer. But we were talking about how Eric used to, even when we were doing 11v11s, it sort of like create scenarios where you almost taught yourself at times, and he was clever enough that you didn't realise, you didn't think you were. But it created a scenario where, right, okay, we're going to play for the next 20 minutes. There's 70 minutes on the clock. There's 20 minutes to go. This side's 2-0 down. This side's 2-0 up. How are you going to approach the game? And it's only sort of subconsciously that sometimes you take these things on because, you know, I've done that many a times over the last, you know, 5 or 6 years as a coach and as a manager. Not at the time realising that I took it on board from the likes of Eric and other people. And it's only when you start talking about it and go, oh yeah, remember we used to do that all the time as young lads back in the day, and I think a lot of it, when you take things from people, I wasn't someone who written down sessions or wrote down stuff, but like I say, subconsciously there was lots of stuff that I did during my time, obviously at United, that must have really sort of was relevant for me, and thought, yeah, okay, I think I can use that.
So obviously at Manchester United during that time, there was plenty of quality talent coming through, including yourself. Who, in your opinion, do you feel was the best player that you played with at the club at the time?
Oh God, there was so many good ones. I think the obvious one for me, and was probably as talented a player that I've probably ever seen, is Scholesy. He just did things 1 to 2 seconds quicker than everybody else, and seeing things 1 to 2 seconds quicker than everybody else. So, whether that was a pass, a shot, a cross, creating movement for himself, creating space, for himself by clever movement. At the time, Giggsy, Betts, Roy, Eric, some unbelievable players, and the impact that sort of Eric had on the club at the time was incredible. But in terms of actual natural talent and the ability to play the game, I think Scholesy was the best.
Yeah. So obviously you went on a few loan spells during your time at United. Do you know, what I'd like to know is, as a young player going out on loan, what sort of mentality did you have going out on loan? Was it sort of, I'm going to play obviously you're going to play as well as you can. Was that to try and get back at United to push into the first team? Or did you have in the back of the mind sort of, I'm going to put myself out there to look for other clubs that might want me on a permanent basis?
I think the first time I went out on loan, believe it or not, to Lincoln, was definitely to sort of try and force my way back into the first team fold at United, and get into the first team squad. I think it was a massive eye opener for me. Like a lot of young players at the time, you're not really ready to go into that type of environment in terms of the Football League environment. You're in a little bit of a bubble at the Premier League clubs, at United and the big clubs. But I think, definitely it was a big eye opener for me. And I knew that if I was going to have to leave United, I would have to be stronger mentally and physically. So when I did return, I worked really, really hard, knowing that I'll give it my best shot at United, see if I can get in, see if I'm good enough to stay around. And if I'm not, and I have to move on, then make sure that I can do that. Because the second time I went out on loan, I had a little spell with Wimbledon and played for them in the Intertoto Cup, as it was at the time, where you had to almost play through the summer. Really enjoyed my spell there. It was brilliant. They wanted to sign me. But then when I eventually went to Grimsby, I knew it was almost sort of do or die for me, really, in terms of when I got back. And when I went back to United after the spell I had at Grimsby, I did really, really well there. I had a couple of months, and I got into all the European squads when I returned, and I was so close to the team in terms of being on the bench a few times. And it was one of them where I thought to myself at that time, a lot of my friends had left the club, and I thought to myself, well, I need to make a decision here. And interestingly, I went to see the manager 3 times, and it was only the 3rd time where I had the courage to ask him to leave. The first 2 times, I knocked on his door, and he was like, "What can I do for you? Sit down." And literally, my mind went blank, and I just come up with something stupid, and then I'd come out of his room, I'd go and see Eric, and he's like, "Have you spoke to him?" And I'm like, I couldn't ask him. So it was the 3rd time. I went in, and I just said, "Look, boss, I need to move on. I need to go and make a career for myself." And to be fair, himself and Eric sat me down and just said, "Look, there's a future here for you. You're going to have to be a little bit more patient, and we can play you in certain games, but I suppose that I'd seen a lot of my friends go and start making a career for themselves. So, that's what I ended up doing, really.
Yeah. So how hard was it in the end to accept that you had to leave then?
Yeah, it was difficult. Although, having said that, it was made a lot more easier by, like I say, the conversations I had with Eric and the boss, because they said, look, it's not certainly down to you. You're in a period where we've got, international after international in the team, and a lot of them were midfield players. A hell of a lot of them were midfield players. So I was just a little bit unlucky, really, timing wise. I always used to joke at my mum and dad that their timing was terrible. Like obviously, I was like the year after, and some of the lads in my year will know that we were the year after the class of '92. And that's the only year really that people remember. So that I can assure you that the class of '93 got a rough end of it. But no, it was one of them where I was 21 at the time, and for as difficult as it was, being a massive Man United fan and from Salford and family, obviously proud that I had the opportunity to play there. I knew that the time was right, and at the time Preston sort of come about, and Colin Murdoch and John Macken had already left, so for me to go to Preston was a little bit of an easier decision. Yeah,
you touched on Preston there, which was your first permanent move away from United. How did the setup there differ to Manchester United setup at obviously the training ground and everything to do with that?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, the actual setup was pretty good, if I'm being honest. I mean, they were a League One club at the time, Deepdale at the time. I think, if I can remember correctly, it was either 2 sides had been done or 3 sides had been done. As it is now, it looks great and it's all done, the 4 sides. But I think it might only be 2 sides that were done, and it had like 2 of the older stands. So that had work that needed to be done on it. The lucky thing is the pitch had been ripped up, the Astro, so it was a grass pitch, and that was fantastic. But the training ground, they never owned the training ground at the time. That was owned by BAE. I know they own it now. But it was sufficient. It was fine. It was like, there was changing rooms, there was a canteen area, there was a downtime area. So it was one of them where, for what we wanted and what we needed, it was good. And obviously it was around the time, it was Gary Peters who took us there, but David Moyes was the assistant. And obviously when Gary lost his job after about 6 months of us being at the club, David took over, and that's when things started to accelerate.
So you achieved promotion with Preston in 2000. You've experienced it both as a manager and as a player. How do the experiences differ getting promotion?
I think it's 10 times more satisfying as a manager. And I mean that with great respect to all the players out there who've been successful and who I've played with. But as players, as an ex-player, and now I can speak about players, when you're a player, you're very selfish.
Yeah,
it's all, you've got, and you have to be, to be fair, to a degree, because I'd like to think I was as good as a teammate as anybody in terms of wanting to win and be part of the team. But ultimately, you had to make sure that you did your job and did your job to the best of your ability. And once you left that training ground, you didn't have to worry or think about anyone else other than making sure that you're in good condition, you're mentally in a good place, and you're ready for the next game. And that was it. Whereas a manager, not only are you looking after and got to be aware of what 20, 25 players are up to, and whether they're in a good frame of mind and whether they're physically fit, you've probably got another 10, 15, 20, 50, depending on the size of the club you're at, staff members as well. So to go through a season as a manager, and even as assistant manager and coach, but slightly less scale, to play 46 games and come out, as a victor, getting promotion, it's a fantastic feeling. And I've had some really, really good sort of feelings, in terms of my management career, in terms of cup runs and promotions. And I've had some horrendous ones as well, and with a couple of defeats at Wembley in finals, which was hard to take.
Yeah, I can imagine. So after Preston, you moved to West Brom. which is where, well, unfortunately, your career got cut short. Do you remember the point at which you knew that you had to call it time on your career?
I do, yeah. That was a dark one. I remember playing in I played in a reserve team game at Newcastle, and it was at Newcastle Falcons at the time, the rugby union stadium. And for some reason, I was going into Preston that weekend because it was a Friday night, and we had the weekend off. And I got a member of staff to drive my car to Newcastle. I got up with the players on the bus with the young players and stuff. And I remember playing in the game, and probably about 20 minutes in or so, I was thinking to myself, it doesn't feel good, this. I've been doing rehab for 2 years. I've had 3 operations. It doesn't feel great, this at all. And then they had young players skipping past me and going round me. And that was my biggest strength, being out of possession. That was my biggest strength, winning the ball back, screening defenders. And I remember like I said, it must have been half an hour on the clock, maybe. And I just remember, people must have been thinking, what the hell is he going? What's he doing? I just walked off the pitch, didn't say anything to anybody, just walked off the pitch, didn't get showered, just went into the changing rooms, took my boots off, put my trackie on, and just left. Just drove. I knew it had done. Done. And I drove from Newcastle to Preston, so it took just over 2 hours. I arrived back in Preston, I'd say maybe midnight. Ended up falling out of the car because I've been in the car for that long, and my knee had stiffened right up. I fell out the car, and I'm thinking, bloody hell, what's this all about? But and I knew that was the time. And I went to see the surgeon on I think it was a Tuesday or the Wednesday. And that's when he said, look, Michael, he said, you can't put your knee through any more of this. He said, unfortunately, my advice would be to concentrate on, things outside of football. So, yeah, it was difficult. It was a difficult moment.
So how hard was it?
How did you deal with that disappointment?
Say again, sorry?
How did you deal with that disappointment? Was there anything you used as a release?
And I was quite fortunate, to be fair. 2 things. One, Gary Megson at the time was brilliant because he said to me, stick around and just stick to a routine. Because I was ready because I was living in the Midlands at the time. I was ready to move back up north towards Preston and the Manchester area. And he just said, look, stick to a routine, come in every day, put your kit on, go and do what you were doing before you got the news. And then figure out what you want to do, whether you want to go into coaching, whether you want to step away from the game. And I did that, and I used to watch the lads train every morning. I started my kit on and stuff, so I felt like a coach, even though I wasn't a coach. And then the other one was the gym, and I sort of took to the gym. So that was my release, that was my getaway, and I ended up going absolutely massive. I was about 15 stone. I was getting obsessed with it. I was having 3 or 4 protein shakes a day, and it was just, I was getting obsessed. But it, in a way, it helped me because it could have gone, completely the other way. Really, do you know what I mean? I could have gone and, a lot of the players struggle now with gambling, with alcohol, and all drugs, all these things. And listen, at the end of the day, that could have quite easily have been me because it was. I'd lost 10 years of my career, and it was on the up at the time, and we were doing well, and we just got promoted with West Brom, and we're now in the Premier League. So, it was tough to take. It was a difficult moment, but I was lucky that I had good people that allowed me to go into the coaching side of things, which certainly helped me.
Yeah, so what was your first move into coaching now?
First move, it was so I did a little spell with the first team because what happened is Gary Megson got sacked and Frank Burrows took over, and he asked me to help him out. So I did a little spell there, but it was Aidy Boothroyd had come into the club as an academy manager, and he just said, why don't you come down and have a look and take one of the younger age groups and see what you think. So so I did do, and I enjoyed it. So I ended up taking the 14s for about 6 months, about half a season. And I was in the minibus on a Sunday morning at like 7 o'clock, going from West Brom to Tranmere and all these places, and it was very different to the lifestyle that obviously you have as a professional footballer and stuff. So that was a good experience for me. But then Aidy'd left to go to Leeds as first team coach, and I remember Dan Ashworth had come in just previous to that, and Dan took over the academy manager role, and he basically just created a role for me. You hear a lot in academy football now about development coach. There's loads and loads of development coaches, but back then there was no such thing as a development coach, and he created a role for me, which basically I looked after the best 4 players in every age group, from the age of 12 up to 18. And he wanted me to almost accelerate them as players and give them a little bit more one-to-one time. And I did that for about 12 months before getting the youth team job, the under-18s role.
Would you say that almost sort of apprenticeship as such, coaching younger age groups, has actually went on to give you an
I think so. I think,
succeed in
yeah, I definitely, I'm a big believer that, to be fair to Dan, he used the phrase, you need to do your time in the trenches. And I think I did that. I think all them experiences, daft it sound, of like getting up early on a Sunday morning and having to not just be the coach, be the dad, be the everything, the guardian to these players, and I think they helped me. I think when I went in to do the youth team, the good thing about being a youth team coach or reserve team coach is you can use lots of ideas and make loads of mistakes, and it's not a big deal because it's not 3 points on the line, and you can get away with it, and you can try things in training, and you don't get judged as much because the players don't see through it as much as what they would do at first team level. So I think that definitely helped me in some of the darker moments I've had as a coach and a manager, and helped me to sort of put things in perspective.
So do you think, your playing days got cut short? Do you think that made you push yourself more on the coaching side because you felt like on a personal level you might have to prove yourself still?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was one of them. I made quite a few mistakes, to be fair, really, in my early days coaching, and certainly going into the management side of it. I think that was due to having my career taken away from me. So I always felt in the earlier part of my career I was in too much of a rush.
Yeah, I
was in too much of a rush to get to the top, and it was one of them where, for some reason, I had in my head that I had to be the best, the youngest. I just had to break records because I've had this like 10 years taken away from me in my playing career. So, in the early part, I was far too much in a rush to sort of get to the top. Whereas now, I'm 10 years or so down the line in terms of the coaching and management side of it, and I'm still only 44, and I hope I've got the next 20 odd years or so in the game, managing and coaching. So, and I think naturally, I back myself as a coach. I do. I think that's one of my biggest strengths, and hopefully that'll be certainly good enough to sort of get me through the next 20 years and keep me in football.
So Portsmouth was your first managerial permanent job. What was it like to take charge of a club, obviously, of that size?
It was brilliant. Yeah, it was brilliant. I mean, I didn't have any expectations whatsoever in terms of getting the job. I spoke to Roy Hodgson. I was the assistant manager at West Brom at the time. So as a young coach, I was an assistant manager in the Premier League, which, was brilliant anyway, working with a top coach. And I spoke to him and just said, look, Portsmouth want to speak to me. And he said, look, go and speak to them, see what they've got to say. I knew they'd spoken to about 12 or 13 managers already before me. And so I had no expectations. I just went, but I hit it off with the owner at the time, who was, he was a Russian guy called Roman Dubov. And he had a partner that him and his partner basically, through one of their companies, have got ownership of the club. And I hit it off with him. He had an injury. He was an ice hockey player, and he had an injury similar sort of time in his career as an ice hockey player. I basically got asked to go for a second interview, which was a bonus. Met his partner that time, and within an hour of sort of going for the second interview, they offered me the job. And I've got to say, for the first probably couple of months, or maybe 1.5 months, 6 weeks or so, it was brilliant. Things were going really well. I had a load of senior players in the dressing room, experienced international players who I was building a bond and a relationship with. And then the club went into administration, and the floor just went beneath me overnight. And we were done 12 points immediately, and it was just one thing after the other. In the January, I had to sell my 6 best players. They all had to go. I had to replace them with young players from Premier League and Championship clubs. So, you'd have players earning sort of double figures a week, your 10s to 15s to 20 grand a week. And I was having to replace them with players earning £1,000 a week, and who people had never heard of. And the biggest satisfaction I got from that season was we had an incredible relationship with the fans. There was a real togetherness, as a club and as a unity. There was so many things that happened in that time that would make your eyes water, where one day we turned up and the kit man, big Kev, said to me, he said, "Oh, we can't train today." So I said, what are you on about? He said, "Well, we've got no equipment, there's no footballs, no." I said, "What are you on about? We've got a container full. I get them out of the container every single." He said, "Yeah, that's the problem." He said, "The people who own the container have been in overnight and changed the locks." Because obviously we were in administration and bills couldn't be paid. So we were clearly hiring, so things like that. And we couldn't pay for bills when people got injured, so we couldn't have scans. We couldn't pay the club were paying obviously food at the time, so we were then having to get all the staff and the players together and get a company who would come in and cook for us. And it was incredible, some of the things that we had to do. The players were on a pay cut of 20%. The administrators are saying to me, "Look, the club's going to go under if we don't find money from somewhere." So I managed to convince the players to take an extra 5% cut, which would allow us to keep staff on and allow us to keep the club running for another 6 months till the end of the season. They were the things that were a massive education in themselves. So for us to only get relegated on the second to last game of the season with all that, the 12 points and everything, it won't be seen as an achievement in the record books. It'll be seen as Portsmouth went down and, they got deducted points. But for me, for us to take it as far as we did was a really, really incredible achievement.
So did you find, in a way, did it help bring the team together? Obviously, because you're all kind of like chipping in, fighting together, one battle, joining as a big team rather than, some players might have just been thinking about the next move. Did it bring you closer together in the end?
I think it did. Especially initially. But what happened was obviously 6 lads left in January, which was difficult. So you're having to bring new players in and bed them in. And what was happening all the time is that because some of the lads who were still left were on big salaries, I was always under pressure from administrators saying that, they need to take deferrals or they need to take cuts. And they wanted me to have the conversations with them rather than themselves. So I felt like a negotiator, I was almost felt as if I was doing their job for them. So for as much as it brought us together, there was always something every single day that was trying to rip that apart and tear that apart, because, you'd have one player saying, "Well, they've rang my agent and they're telling me that I'm not going to get paid next month." So it was a difficult scenario, but there's no doubt about it that the more adversity that you do have as a club, it can work in your favour in terms of bringing you together.
Yep. You then moved on to Blackpool. What was your experience like managing there?
Good club. I just made a poor choice, and what I mean by that is don't mean by the club in any way, shape or form. Listen, he's one of them where I'd played for Preston North End, so going there it was slightly controversial anyway, because it's like Man U, Man City, Liverpool, it was like that type of. So it was slightly. But the biggest mistake I did, I didn't do my due diligence on the ownership. I think what happened to me at Portsmouth could happen to anybody. So I've got no regrets about that. That can happen to anyone anytime. But the Oystons probably as difficult, or probably the most difficult people I've ever dealt with, especially Carl. I've never come across anyone like him, to be fair, and I hope I never do in football. It was a difficult, and that was probably the reason why I left so early, if I'm being honest. He was just really, really difficult to deal with, and it was one of them where I knew very, very quickly that I wasn't going to be able to work with him. So when the opportunity to come to go to Blackburn, I jumped at it. But having said that, like I say, the staff that I worked with at Blackpool were great. The actual players, I only had 12 or so games there as a manager, but they give me everything. We had a good group. We were playing on an absolute cabbage patch of a pitch. It was like, I don't know if you remember at the time, it was horrendous. Every manager that played there come in the office afterwards and just spent 20 minutes complaining about the pitch, and I'm having to apologise every time. But so it was a good club, and I enjoy working with the people there, other than obviously Carl and the owners.
Yeah, so you touched it there. How important is it for you and obviously other managers to have a close relationship with the board and the director at a club? I think it is. I think it's really important, and again, that's why that spell I had in management between like Portsmouth, Blackpool, and Blackburn, I think that's why it was a big eye opener for me and a big education for me. Where when I left Blackpool, obviously I jumped at the chance of leaving the club because I couldn't, have a relationship with people that were running it. And then obviously I've gone to another club where the owners are thousands of miles away in India. And I just didn't get a chance to sort of build up any rapport and any relationship with them because I wasn't there long enough. It was a dressing room that was full of experienced players, and the remit when I first met them was to reduce the wage bill and bring the average age of the squad right down and be competitive in the championship. So it was first season, stay in there. Second season, establish ourselves in the championship. And then obviously after that, kick on. And we reduced the wage bill in January by about 4 million in literally a month. And then obviously we would have had to sort of probably double that again come the end of the season, which we were confident of doing. And I ended up losing my job. It's the only time in sort of management I've been sacked. I think people forget that. I got headhunted from Portsmouth. I got headhunted from Blackpool. And I got headhunted to a degree from Oxford to go to Leicester later on in my career. So Blackburn's the only time I've literally lost my job. And the way I lost it was irritating. It bugged football at the time that I was there for 2.5 months, and to this day I've never met him. Yeah.
So you go and figure that one out. It's one of them where you're getting sat by someone who leaves a letter and hasn't even got the bottle to face you and look you in the eye. And to this day now, from then, I've still to this day never met the guy. So
it's crazy.
It was difficult, and it was difficult for me to take. So I think that was the reason why I took a year out, and I didn't take a year out in terms of sat on my backside and not doing anything. What I did was I went and watched loads and loads of football at different levels.
Yeah. So your next move was obviously Oxford. Did you feel like you needed to go to a club which was a long-term project rather than say what you'd done in the past and they wanted short-term success?
100%, absolutely, definitely. And I did so much due diligence on the owner at the time, Darryl Eales. Darryl, I knew, was a massive, massive football fan. He was a big Birmingham City fan. I knew his background in terms of, he was a CEO, at Lloyd's Capital, like hedge fund, all that type of stuff, investment banking. So I knew that I would have to spend my money wisely, and I would have to justify everything I did. But I thought that would be good for me. He made it very, very clear from day one that, he see me as the person that, was going to take the club to the next level. So I felt comfortable, and I actually lost my first 4 games at Oxford, and then we drew 3. So 7 games in, after being out for just over a year, and the way it ended at Blackburn, I was like 7 games in and not won a game. So it was the first 6 months was pretty tough, but Darryl knew that I'd walked into a dressing room that had a losing mentality, because at Oxford they'd lost 8 of their last 9 games the previous season, and it takes time to sort of spin that and get it round. And the second half of the season and the following 2 seasons, I'd be very surprised. I hope I do, touch wood, but I'd be very surprised if I have that much success at another club within such a short space of time. In terms of promotions, Wembley finals, but probably more importantly, we made the club a ridiculous amount of money on young players being sold to Championship and Premier League clubs.
So you touched on then, how hard is it, for a manager, for you to come into a club and change that mentality that they've already got instilled in them from previous forms?
I think you can buy your way out of trouble. I think what we did and was really, really pleasing was we can just completely change the culture of the football club, from top to bottom. And we created an environment where everybody wanted to come to work and nobody wanted to leave. We created such an environment within the group that there'd be times where we're just saying to the players, like, go on, get lost, piss off home, you need to leave. But yeah, and we brought a young group of players together, so we didn't have to spend massive amounts of money on senior players, experienced players. We just got this group of players together, and they just enjoyed being around. And
how important is it for you to make sure that the players have such a good relationship with the fans, and how do you sort of get them to build that relationship?
Well, I think first and foremost they have to be aware of the community of the club that they're working for and they're playing for, and I think it's important that when you see players in an afternoon and they've got to go and visit a school or a shop or a shopping mall, these type of stuff, I think it's important that when they go, they're representing the football club, so the way they behave and they act with people is important, because it's like anything in life, isn't it? If we have a conversation and we get on, the next time mine or your name comes up in a conversation, whatever it may be, if you're humble and respectful, you'll be like, oh, actually, he's a good lad, or he's a good person and stuff, and that builds. And I think that's what we did at Oxford, where all of a sudden it's actually, do you know what, the players are really approachable, they're decent people, they're humble, and they just happen to be footballers, so it was about making sure that we wanted to sign good players, but we wanted to sign good people as well. And like I say, we used SWOT analysis of things to help us within the club. And I think one of the best books I ever read was Legacy, regarding the All Blacks. I actually somehow got hold of James Kerr, the author of the book. I got hold of his email address, and I sent him an email just out of the blur. Just thought, why not? Might as well just chance my arm. And anyway, I sent him an email just saying, look, really enjoyed the book, thought it was fantastic. Not expecting anything. I just said, look, you had a big influence on me and some of my staff. And anyway, about a month later, I left my phone number there. A month later, I got an email basically saying, when can I come in? Loved your story, blah, blah, blah. And I had to, and he left his number, because I had left my number. So I rang him and I just said, look, James, listen, I'd love you to come in and speak, but I've got no budget. I said, I can't budget for speakers. And he said, no, he said, I don't want paying a penny. I just, he said, I love the email that you sent. It was great. I appreciate it. And he came in and he spoke to the whole football club, academy, first team, CEOs, chairman, everybody. And for 45 minutes, he showed us a video and presented us a video about the All Blacks and how they work, and you couldn't hear a pin drop. Like literally couldn't hear a pin drop in the hall. So, stuff like that sort of resonated with everyone within the club, and that's how the club grew. And like I say, for 2.5 years, it was as good as you can get it in football terms. It doesn't matter what level you're playing at, coaching at, managing at. In terms of an environment, it'd be very, very difficult to ever beat that.
So you obviously took them to Wembley. How was it managing at such a an iconic stadium?
It was the best and worst 2 days of my life. Well, I wouldn't say it was in football terms anyway. It was I mean, obviously it was great. It was great, and I think you appreciate, even looking back now at the games, the first game against Barnsley, we were massive underdogs, and we put on a really good show, and we give them a really, really good game. They went on to get promoted to the Championship. Obviously, we were a League Two team at the time, and we did really well. And there was 70-odd thousand there, which was incredible. So it wasn't, like a 20,000 at Wembley, and it just felt like it probably is now for the Premier League boys playing without anyone there. So that was tough. The second defeat was the toughest. So obviously the following season we went back and we were favourites against Coventry. We were like challenging for the playoffs. They were near the bottom and ended up getting relegated out of League One, and we'd beaten them in the league. I think it was 4-0 about 4 weeks previous. So it was a typical, probably some of the players going into the game expecting to win the game, and you could argue that was, my job to make sure they didn't go into the game complacent. I could show you there was nothing we did prior to it that would sort of suggest that, but it was just one of them things. We didn't start well. We were 2-0 down, and we just give ourselves too much to do. And but again, the experience of sort of playing in front of a crowd which was close to 80,000 is difficult to beat. Yeah.
How hard is it to watch, coming second in a cup like that? How hard is it to watch the winners make that walk up the steps and you have to watch them celebrate? How hard is that? Yeah, it's difficult. And the first time round, I made the players watch it, just because out of respect, really. And it was interesting because the second time round when it happened, it was difficult, but I actually give the players the option if they wanted to go in and not watch it. I didn't have to because, but fair play to the players, and it probably just shows the group of players we have. The captain, it was like, no. To be fair, out of respect, I think it's the right thing to do. And that's, like I say, that's the culture that we set. At the end of the day, we came second best. I still think our team was much better. It's just that they performed on the day, and in the end, they dug out the result. So obviously you left Oxford.
Seems like your team sort of have that underpinning, togetherness culture. A lot of respect. How important do you think that is in management, to have that underpinning of culture? For me personally, it is. Yeah. For me personally, it is. I think, and I think they're the sort of values that we had at United as kids. It was one of them where I remember the boss saying, and this is why the job that Eric did was so impressive, because there's one thing playing in the Premier League or at a top football club, and I'm slightly biased in saying this, but there's another thing playing for Man United. I can't explain it. It's just the pressure and everything that goes with playing for Man United and what's expected you is different, because the boss was massive on it, but then Eric sort of went out and did it from within the U team as well, and give players a grounding, and you knew exactly what it'd be like if you had to go into the first team, because the philosophy was dead simple. It was to win, but to win in a way that
everybody wanted to see. So it was like we had to win, but we had to win well. Yeah. And they were the two things. But having said that, and these are the reason why I mention it now and talking about it, is that if we did lose, if there was any sign of sort of disrespect and feeling sorry for ourselves or not showing the opposition respect, we got an absolute rollicking because we fought hard, we played hard, but at the same time, if the opposition come out on top, it was, important to show respect. And I think that stuck with me as well again. And I found it hard at times, certainly in my early career as a manager, when I lost, to be nice after the game, because it's difficult, because there's everything that goes with it. But I think it's important, because at the end of the day, unless you've been a manager, it's very, very difficult to explain how hard it is at 10-5 when you've just lost. Yeah. And then within 5 minutes, you've got to go and speak to your players and then go and address the media. And some of the questions that you get can be very difficult with your emotions running high.
I find, how hard is it to kind of bite your tongue in some situations in front of the media?
Very, very difficult. Because they're very clever. They ask the same question in about 5 or 6 different ways, and there's only so many times you can say the same thing. And to be fair, I remember in I think it was my second year at Oxford. My wife Jess, she works in PR, and her boss it was a guy called Simon Kellner, and he used to be the editor for The Independent for about 13 years before he set his own PR business up. And he gave me a little bit of media training, and I always used to find like video or camera or TV much easier than I did radio. And I got into the habit on the radio, because if I couldn't see, if I knew the audience couldn't see me and it was only me and the person interviewing me, I'd end up talking too much. So I'd answer the question, and it'd take me about 2 or 3 minutes to answer the question. And because he never said anything. Yeah. So to be fair to Simon, he used to say to me, answer the question. And then even if there's that little bit of awkward silence, whether it's 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, almost give the guy who's interviewing that little look and a little bit of a nod, as if to say, that's me done. You're going to fill the airtime now. And that certainly helped me going forward. It was like, I'd answer the question, and the lad who was interviewing me knew I was getting nothing more. and it wasn't my job to fill the space. At the time, I used to think it was my job to fill the space. And then he made me realise, no, it's the interviewer's job to fill the space.
So you left Oxford to go to Leicester under Craig Shakespeare. What was it like, no disrespect to the players at Oxford, to make that jump in calibre of players?
Yeah, it was brilliant. Enjoyed it. Absolutely loved it. Obviously, I'd worked in the Premier League before as an assistant manager with Roy Hodgson, so I felt comfortable as a young coach then. I felt even more relaxed and at ease with myself, because I had so much experience by the time I got to Leicester. The fact that I was going in there as the assistant manager as well, there isn't the responsibilities as an assistant as there is as a manager. The fact that I had to go in there and do what I think is my best attributes anyway, is coaching. Again, it was music to my ears. It was an opportunity to get back in the Premier League. Hindsight's a wonderful thing, and you think, people maybe say, oh, should you have left Oxford? Should you have stayed there? But when the Premier League come calling, it's a difficult place to say no to. It's very difficult. So it was great, working with the likes of Vardy, Mahrez, Maguire, these people, all international players. They just won the Premier League a couple of seasons back, big club. Great, it was great. And I mean, the only thing obviously was difficult is that I didn't see and didn't expect Craig to lose his job after 8 games. So when he lost his job, in fact, I took a couple of games, which we won the 2 games that I was in charge, and I enjoyed that. Away at Swansea in the Premier League, which was great. And it was our first win for a while, and then we beat Leeds in the League Cup as well. And then I spent all week preparing the team for the Everton game, and then Claude Puel come in the day before the game and took all the plaudits. But no, I mean, look, it was one of them where we just seen the game in two completely different ways, myself and Claude. Yeah. So I had, it was one of them. We didn't particularly get on that great, and but it wasn't a major issue. It was just one of them where it was never going to work. It was never going to work. And once the season had finished, I had a feeling what happened would happen. I'm just disappointed how they did it. To do it for, like the day before we were due back for pre-season, and I was actually on my honeymoon at the time, believe it or not. Can you believe that? God. To receive a call when you're on a moon, and you're about to return home, and it was just the way it was done. It left a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth. Yeah. But I just felt it could have been done earlier. As soon as the season's finished, give me an opportunity to go and find work elsewhere if that's what they wanted.
Yeah, obviously on a personal level, being a Halifax Town fan, we've got the claim to fame that we made Jamie Vardy. What was he like on a day-to-day in training?
Do you know what, Vard? I found him great. I think it'll surprise people how intelligent he is. Football intelligence. Yeah. Very, very intelligent. I mean, I did a lot of the pre-match and post-match analysis meetings because Claude struggled with the language barrier. So I did a lot of the preparation going into the games about the opposition. And Vard was one of them where he knew everything about the opposition, so he probably comes across as a bit of a Jack the Lad and someone who's always a loudest voice, which a lot of the time he is, don't get me wrong. He's a joyful character. But he takes his football serious, and I don't think people see that side of him and seen enough of that side of him. He knows who he's up against. He knows what the strengths and weaknesses of that player. Even players in other positions. I'd be taking a meeting, and he'd be going, "Happy, one thing. What about such and such?" And I'd have to say, "Yeah, Bard, that's the next slide. Just calm down, wait. It's coming. So." But I loved it because I could have a conversation with him and have a bit of banter with him, and I knew that he really cared about his football. So it was brilliant. It was great. I mean, Riyadh was probably, other than obviously the lads I spoke about at United, he was as talented as a player I've coached. Obviously I played with the lads at United, your Giggsy, your Scholes, your Nevs, all these. So, but I never coached them. I only played with them. But in terms of actually coaching, Riyadh was probably as talented as a player I've ever coached.
Oh yeah, you can see that when he plays. He's that left foot is pretty lethal. So you left Leicester, as you said, and now you're at Lincoln City. How's your time been there so far?
Do you know what? It's been good. I mean, it's been obviously a bit crazy and a bit disruptive. Going into a football club that has had 3 years of success under different management can be difficult, because obviously you've got to fill the shoes of people who've been successful. But the one thing that they said to me when I spoke to them is that they realised that things had to change. They'd spent a lot of money getting success. Coming out of the conference and out of League Two. They played a certain style of football that they felt was going to be unsustainable going forward. It was very direct style, but worked, and they got the success doing it. But I think the reason that they wanted me to come to the football club is that they wanted to find different ways of keeping the club sustainable, and one of the ways was to improve value on the pitch. And the way you improve value on the pitch is developing young players to allow them to flourish on the pitch for Lincoln, and then hopefully, going and signing for bigger clubs in the Championship, the Premier League. And obviously they've clearly looked at a record at Oxford and felt if I could try and replicate that at Lincoln, then obviously we'll hopefully have a little bit of success on the pitch, but at the same time have a lot of success off it with player sales. So going in September, October, like I did, the group, we were the oldest average age in the whole of the league, so I knew that had to change. We took a massive risk in January, but it was a calculated one because we got rid of a lot of players and brought a lot of young players in. And then obviously we went through a tough spell where people were like, oh, has he brought too many young players in? The results are not going to... And then come through that and results started to improve again and we were playing well. And then bloody COVID arrived. So it was one of them where we were just coming through a good spell and starting to play well again. And so it's been a little bit stop-start. But I think what's happened is because of the risk that we took in January and making so many changes, I think a lot of clubs are going to find it a lot more difficult now before the new season starts.
Yeah.
Whereas because we made that many changes in January, we might only have to bring 5 or 6 players in now. So I think what happened is it's basically, in a cut a long story short, we've found ourselves in a actually stronger position than probably most clubs because. You know, you'll find a lot of clubs, certainly in League One and League Two now, will probably have to bring 15, 16 players in. That's how big of a turnaround their squad will have to be.
So how hard has it been over the past few months to kind of keep in contact with the team and make sure all your players are staying fit? How tough has it been to do that?
Yeah, it's been difficult. Doing a lot of Zoom calls with the players, making sure they're okay. You know, obviously, mental health is a big part of sport now, and I think there's a realization that there's a lot of stigma surrounding it. 10 years ago, maybe even 3 or 4 years ago, whereas now people are a lot more open up to speaking to people and talking about it. And we just try to, try and keep them communication levels up as much as we could, give them things to do, whether it be social or obviously making sure they stay fit. And just making sure that the stuff that we are communicating to them, will stand them in good stead for when we return for pre-season. So we've had a couple of voluntary sessions over the last week or so. We're going to continue to do that for the next 2 weeks, and then we're looking to start pre-season properly on the 3rd of August.
Yeah, so it's exciting times for obviously yourself getting back onto the pitch for your players as well. Well, I think that wraps us up perfectly today. Thank you very much, Michael, for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you.
Thanks very much.
No problem. No, I've enjoyed it. It's been great.
Perfect. Thank you very much.